background. Good to see you. My name is Colonel Jason Quinter. I'm currently the commanding officer of Marine Air Control Group 38, so stationed here locally at Marine Corps Station Miramar. We're assigned force to 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, so part of 3rd MAW, but also part of 1MEF, and also part of Marfor PAC. So we're PACOM assigned force. So I'm going to probably talk for, I don't know, maybe 30, 35 minutes, and then I'll try to leave the rest of the time over for questions if you have any. If not, I can just keep going, I guess. But so Marine Air Control Group 38, by a show of hands, like who has a background, who knows, in aviation command and control, aside from the TAC group and the TACRON, my partners in crime out here? Okay, that's good. So some of you are here out of that interest. What about aviation ground support? Okay, so a couple folks. And what about C4, cyber? Okay. So I asked because we're all of those things, which is old and new. So the Marine Air Control Group under Force Design 2030 has gone through transformation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to try to divide that up between Multifunction Air Operations Center and also Aviation Ground Support. Talk about some of the synergy that we gain by combining some units, and then I'll probably talk a little bit about C4 Cyber and some things that I've been working on with our comm squadron. So our group's got about 3,500 Marines and sailors spread across 7 squadrons. In Force Design, we out of necessity in the wing, moved our Marine Wing support squadrons into the control group. And people always ask, like, well, why did we do that? And I would say one of the main reasons, if not the only reason, was just the span of control. Our MAG commanders, I'm one of 5 MAG commanders in 3rd MAW. Some of our flying MAGs have 8 and 9 squadrons, and it's just a lot to manage for one commander and 1 sergeant major. So the Marine Wing support squadrons used to be organic to the flying MAGs, and now they're all under 1 commander. Part of that reason we had to do that was we lost about 44% of our structure in each squadron, and we completely cut one of our MWSSs. So 374, MWSS 374 that used to be in 29 Palms was a Force Design casualty. They don't exist anymore. So we have 3 squadrons, and on a daily basis, it sometimes takes 1 plus squadron to make a squadron. Because the institution is still adjusting to what it, we haven't changed the design of service level training. We haven't changed the design of some of our service level tasking, and so the rest of the Marine Corps still has some learning to do to I like to say, this is not your grandfather's MWSS. We're going to get some of that structure back, according to the Commandant, so that we'll hopefully right-size our MWSSs. So the MWSSs are our aviation ground support capability. Just to kind of walk through what are the roles and missions of MWSS. So the name of the game is aviation ground support. So we do airfield damage and repair. Forward arming and refueling is probably the one mission that most people associate with MWSS, is FARPing. So we've got an airfield ops company that specializes in that. Forward aviation combat engineering. So we have, like, all 3 of our Marine Wing support squadrons right now are commanded by combat engineers. So we have a large equipment pool of bulldozers, scrapers, hydro seeders. And so right now, for instance, out at in the Chocolate Mountains, or the base of Chocolate Mountains in Yuma, we're building about a 4,000-foot runway from Watts 1 to use for the VMGR to use, for KC-130s to use. So surveyors out there moving dirt around. We're basically building an improvised runway with our own Marines. So that's our expeditionary capability. Base recovery after attack is another mission, and then. I mentioned airfield ops companies. So think about AM2 matting. So if you've ever been out to 29 Palms and you've seen, like, the self out there, we've got tens of thousands of square feet of AM2 matting, all the lighting that needs to go on that runway. We install all of that, and then the forward arming and refueling points as well. So, and then the last one is aircraft salvage and recovery. So when we have accidents, we're the ones that go out and either recover the aircraft. Like, let's say, if we had a MV-22 have a hard landing and the nose gear or something would be broken, like, we would go out and recover the aircraft to bring it back to be repaired to fly again. And unfortunately, sometimes we do salvage operations where we're recovering an aircraft that's not usable. So those are the activities is what we call them, the 6 activities of aviation ground support. And just recently, underneath Project Eagle, which is the Marine Corps Aviation's Deputy Commandant for Aviation's transformation of Marine Corps Aviation plan in 2022 or 2023, as you were. Aviation ground support is going to become the 7th function of Marine Corps Aviation, to kind of elevate it on par with the rest of the functions of Marine Aviation. So that's our MWSSs. I would say right now in February 2024, the one capability that most people who have heard of Control Group 38 associate with us is the MAOC, the Multifunction Air Operations Center, and that is our aviation command and control capability inside 1MEF. Historically, for our young officers, Sarah, like when you take EWS, you learn about the TAOC, you learn about early warning and control detachments, you learn about the DASC, the different MAX agencies inside the wing, right? What we basically did, if you just had to summarize it, just to keep it simple, is we took our TAOC capability, which is in my case is our unit is MAX 1, and we took our direct air support control unit, which is MAX 3, and we combined them into one formation. And so we just recently moved some company level formations around inside our own group. We moved our TAC company, which is the wing commanding General Borg Scholte's command post, over into MAX 1, and we moved our second air defense company from MAX 1 into MAX 3. So what that enabled us to do is combine those formations together so we could force generate multifunction air operations centers. So it's a more capable way for us to deploy, and the operational necessity for MAOC is really the battle space. As you're doing analyzing the battle space framework, and you compare it to some place like MNF West in Iraq or RC Southwest in Afghanistan, what we're anticipating as an Indo-PACOM assigned force is having to force generate aviation command and control ground support capability, and we need to be able to send it to more places. So we need to be smaller, more agile, but just as capable. And so that's why we created MAOC. That's the reason. And obviously, if we were to deploy and support a combat operations, the $1 million question is how many battle management areas could we handle, at one time? And we're working through a lot of that right now, trying to answer those questions ourselves. So within MAX 1, which will by 2025 redesignated as MTACUS, I like to refer to them as our sortie generation capability. So that's your TAC company and your 3 air traffic control companies. And inside MAS 3, we used to have 3 air support companies. Now what we have is 4 air control companies. When you take the 3 air support companies and the 2 air defense companies and combine them together. So force generation, the goal is each air control company could force generate 1 MAOC and 2 tactical air control elements, which is the next echelon down in the chain. So, and I think that one of the other things I wanted to mention, I think it was in talking to General Gehring when he was still our MALCG, our current MEFCG. I think it was, we could maybe say, for lack of a better way of describing it, like an unintended consequence. Like sometimes you make a decision to do something and you're like, oh, that actually worked out pretty good. So I think one of the things that we maybe didn't necessarily think about in advance was synergies to creating, to putting the MWSSs underneath one commander. And so what we refer to that as now is Aviation Command and Control Ground Support. And so if you think about the 2 pacing commodities in a fight in Indo-PACOM, really the 2 most important commodities are bandwidth and logistics. Because you need connectivity, and you need it in more places as you spread yourself out and disaggregate across, we'll just say like the Philippines archipelago, for instance, or Palau or something like that. And it's very difficult in that type of environment to sustain yourself. When you have all of that capability, because the other squadron that I sit over top is Com Squadron 38, which is our C4 cyber capability inside the wing. You get a lot of, I would say, unplanned synergy. Because if you think about expeditionary advanced space operations, distributed maritime operations, and littoral operations in the contested environment, which are the three operating concepts that the Marine Corps is rallying around in Force Design 2030, and you start to disaggregate in order to be more survivable, and you think about employing yourself in that manner, you get a lot of efficiencies by putting the MWSSs in the control group under one commander, and so because our MWSSs are much smaller than they used to be, I have the ability to move Marines across from one squadron to another to meet the demands of my peer MAG commanders. So like MAG 11, MAG 13, MAG 16, and MAG 39 are the flying MAG. So yeah, just different echelons. And then the operating concept that 1 MEF and 3rd MAL are operating under right now is called the hub spoke node construct. And in second Marine Aircraft Wing, they call it distributed aviation operations. I would say, when I'm talking to my peers, it's more or less the same thing, labeled something different, but I'd say that if you were comparing those two operating concepts to one another, they're probably like 85 to 95% overlap in the Venn diagram, and maybe like 5 to 10 or maybe 10 to 15% original thought, like stuff that's like specific to one or the other. But really, hub spoke node is how we would have to force flow the wing into Indo-PACOM. When you think about our basis posts and stations, 3rd MAL is spread out across 2 states and 3 different air stations: Marine Corps Station Camp Pendleton, Marine Corps Station Miramar, which are both here in the San Diego area, and Marine Corps Air Station Yuma, which is in Arizona. So just getting to the joint operating area is a challenge in and of itself. And if you think about C-17s and black bottom ships, just deploying in Phase 0 and Phase 1 of a joint operation would be a real challenge for really all of 1 MEF. It's not exclusive to 3rd MAL. So, but as we lay down those forces, I think if you think about expeditionary advanced base operations, for instance, it's highly likely that you would see the Marine Wing Support Squadrons with the Aviation Command and Control Squadrons and the MACs anyway. So we've started to experiment with what that looks like in smaller formations, and how do we spread the force out even more. So that is the latest and greatest. Those are the happenings in Control Group 38. That's what they mostly asked me to talk about while I was here. The other thing near and dear to my heart is JADC2, and obviously we're at AFCEA West, so we're going to talk a little bit about C4 and cyber. I am not an Aviation Command and Control officer. I'm a comm officer. I'm an 0602. So the comm squadron I naturally gravitate to that squadron and have to catch myself sometimes because that's my background. But we're up at MCTISA right now at Project Convergence Capstone 4, operating in the Tomato Patch with Army Futures Command. Lieutenant General Kaufman is who we've been coordinating through, but it's a combination of, I think, a surface action group from 3rd Fleet, I think a combination of BMD shooters and littoral combat ships. Our TACGRU and TACGRON partners are out there. We've got Patriot and THAAD in the Tomato Patch. And what we're really trying to do is integrate across the joint force. And obviously, the goal of JADC2 is to connect every sensor to every shooter, and that's across the joint world, not just internal to the Marine Corps. So obviously, the whole reason JADC2 is important is interoperability challenges. We have equipment that doesn't interface properly. We have software that doesn't interface properly. And as a Department of Defense, we're really trying to get after that. And that was the reason that the SecDef created the JADC2 strategy. So inside Control Group 38, I'm leading an effort called Project Dynamis. And I think here in the coming months, you'll hear General Glavy roll out Project Dynamis. It has become the Marine Corps' JADC2 effort for the whole service. So there's a reason why we need to do this, in my professional opinion. We were and still are and still will be integrally aligned with the Navy. We are in the Department of the Navy. We deploy on Navy ships with our Navy brothers and sisters, and so Project Overmatch is still something that we will be part of. The significance of Project Dynamis is there's things that the Navy will have to palm for, and there's things that the Navy won't palm for. If it's a program like a ground program of record, that's a Marine Corps thing. We need to go buy that with Marine Corps money, and so that's kind of the impetus behind why we need a dedicated service level JADC2 effort. I call it a rally point. That's what I refer to it as. It's not a program of record any more than Admiral Small and what we're working on at NIVIC PAC is. It's an overarching effort, Navy-wide, to connect all sensors and shooters in the Joint Force, the Navy's contribution to that. So what is Project Dynamis? I'd say the central idea is it's a JADC2 accelerator. Inside the Marine Corps, we have a plan called the Network Modernization Plan it's been signed out several years now by the director of C4 at Headquarters Marine Corps. I think right now, since we have a deputy commandant, it gets signed out at General Glavy's level now, I believe. But we're trying to modernize our networks for the future fight. And unfortunately, we're suffering the same challenge that the other services are. And there's a lot of technology that's proliferated across the IT and the tech industries in the United States and elsewhere, other countries, that we just haven't integrated into our military formations. It's really that simple. And you think about the way you operate in your personal life with your cell phone, it kind of proves my point, right? You're doing things that you should be doing, you should be able to do at work that just aren't possible right now. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. So Project Dynamis has got 4 lines of operation. The first is modernizing the C4 network for a DDoS environment. So part of that is related to the transport portion of the network and infrastructure. So our bases and stations are, across the FIDIP, upgrading our fiber infrastructure, increasing the size of the pipes for the fiber optic cable coming onto our bases and stations across the Marine Corps. We're in the process of transitioning to cloud. And I said this yesterday when I spoke at the Dawn IT conference upstairs. The critical requirement for JADC2 is cloud. That we will not accomplish JADC2 in any way, shape, or form, the vision or the strategy, without cloud. So what does that mean? Well, I would say the same thing applies to a Navy ship as applies to Marines ashore. What we need is a hybrid cloud architecture. We need our network to be hybrid cloud enabled. So what does that mean? Across the Marine Corps anyway, we've got different echelons of the network, right? At the enterprise level, we've got Marine Corps Cyber Operations Group, which is in Quantico, right, who falls underneath MAR4 Cyber. At the regional level, we have 3 network battalions, and we have our installations and stations. So in our case, that's Marine Corps Installation West. And then at the tactical level, we have actual units and formations that deploy in support of combat operations, right? And in Control Group 38, in our case, that's Com Squadron 38, right? So we are the units that provision NIPRNet and SIPRNet for the Marines on the battlefield. And obviously, JWICS is TS comms is provisioned by the intelligence community in the Marine Corps. So if you think about the network itself, I think the second Lou is developing the data fabric and actually transitioning to the cloud, which we're in the process of doing across the Marine Corps right now. So, the Joint Warfighting Cloud Capability Contract, we've got 4 prime vendors. It's Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, Google, and Oracle all have a part of that contract. And the Marine Corps Cyber Operations Group is trying to set up landing zones in IL4 and IL6 so that we can deploy edge devices on our network and leverage the cloud at the tactical edge. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But yesterday I spoke a little bit about AI and machine learning. Lu 3 is federating authoritative data for AI, for machine learning, for data big data analytics. The DoD has data standards now. We talk about, they use the acronym VALTIS, but the reality of the situation right now is across the entire department, the Marine Corps included, we have a lot of work to do to structure our data so we could actually run algorithms on our data. I would consider our data to be very dirty. It's not managed properly. And as a service, like the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, the Space Force, we're working through that right now. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done. The best way I could think to describe it, if you don't know much about AI or machine learning or data analytics or large language models, is it's kind of like it's not a perfect comparison, but just bear with me. It's like when you're formatting a spreadsheet. So what do? you set up columns. You got to think through, like, okay, what's the header going to be on this column, and then you're trying to sort through that data. Sometimes you're making like a scatter plot or something so you can illustrate that data in a different way. So instead of just looking like numbers in a column, it says something to you. Take that up to a much higher level. That's what metadata tagging and some of the other things we got to do, making the data visible, accessible, usable. That's what the Department of Defense is really trying to get after. That's what CDAO is doing. Used to be the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, and so we have all these authoritative data sources from programs of record. That data's got to be cleaned in order to do something with it. So, why would you care about this? Is this specific to one warfighting function? I would say no, it's not. There are use cases for AI and machine learning from warfighting all the way to the supporting establishment. In the Navy, Millington or Quantico, human resources, logistics, sustainment, maneuver, fires, force protection, you name it. There are applications for AI and machine learning that we're not even conceiving yet. Once we get those authoritative data sources aggregated in one place, we federate all of our systems so that they all can talk to one another, we'll be at the tip of the iceberg, I think, in terms of what our potential power is inside DoD for AI and machine learning. We're not even scratching the surface yet. But what we're really trying to do is weaponize that data. And why would that matter? Well, if you think about John Boyd's OODA loop. We learn that as young Marines, we learn that as young sailors, young airmen, observe, orient, decide, act, right? Well, you're operating in 2024 at machine speed. So what does that mean? Well, we're not necessarily talking about robot wars yet, but that's the direction that we're heading. Like, let's not mince words. What we're talking about right now is the desire for semi-autonomous warfare. That's what JADC2 is really all about. It's about kill chains, and how do you automate the kill chain? Why would you want to do that? Well, it's pretty simple. My 96-core processor cognitively thinks faster than your brain does, and so therefore, if I'm using my computer and you're using your brain, I'm going to close the kill chain faster than you, and warfare is fundamentally a contest between who makes the decision faster and acts faster, right? We learn that through our education continuum in the military. So there's technology available now to automate a lot of things that human beings have been doing since our military services existed, where machines should be doing that stuff now. And you can think of countless examples of where that's happening in your personal life right now. You can go on and on. Just think about some of the apps that you use on your phone. A lot of your life is automated now, whether you stop or care to think about it or not. And so what we're trying to do is modernize the kill chain for peer competition. And we're talking about competition between two countries, really, where we are the world beater in inventing new technology. Like, make no bones about it, we invented the internet. I mean, to stop and think about that for a minute and how that changed the world forever, right? And we're up against a peer adversary that's really good at stealing everything we invent and using it for other purposes, right? So I like to say, we can't afford to show up to a gunfight with a knife. And for a lot of people that think AI and machine learning and data analytics is like years away still, I would argue that you're wrong. That you might not want to learn it, and that may be your reason you're saying that, but it's staring at you in the face every day. And that takes me to LU 4, Project Dynamite, which is educate the force. We have a problem across the Department of Defense right now with C4 cyber literacy. We don't have enough people that understand C4 cyber or even want to learn about it. So, my challenge to anybody who's on active duty is, we have our work cut out for us, and I understand it's technical. But I would also argue that it's very important. And so we need to figure out how to infuse this education in the appropriate places in our schoolhouses at the appropriate level, for the rank of the person that we're educating, because we're no longer living in a world where people can run away from this. It's not going anywhere. If anything, you're going to get old and you're going to go somewhere. But if you're going to be on active duty in 2024 and beyond, the longer you go and you put off learning about C4 cyber, the less useful you will be to your institution, whether you're a Marine, a soldier, a sailor, an airman, a guardian, because that's the world we live in. I do think it's kind of ironic that in our personal lives, and I've said this before, we will wait around the corner in the mall at the Apple store to get the new iPhone. So in our personal lives, we're absolutely technologically savvy and perfectly comfortable sitting down and figuring out the new features on our iPhone, the exquisite software that Apple designs. But in our personal lives, we default to what we like to do. And so I would just, encourage everybody to maybe think a little bit differently. And if it's something that you've always kind of avoided learning, I would encourage you not to do that anymore. So we talk about the cloud. We talked a little bit about the transport layer across the LU1. The proliferation of PLEO is very important. We're taking advantage of multi-orbit satellite constellations. All the services are, not just the Marine Corps. Starshield, Starlink, and LEO, GEO, HEO, MEO. We're trying to be hard targets. Air Force Research Laboratory, the Space Force is doing all sorts of great work with OPIR at different orbits in space to make our satellite constellation indestructible. And I said this to a couple people. When I was still working on the Joint Staff, we used to talk about WGS and Milstar satellite constellations were big, juicy targets. That ain't the world we're living in anymore. We're not even using those satellite constellations very much anymore. We're using proliferated low Earth orbit satellite constellations, in particular Starlink and Starshield. And so if you look at Ukraine and what happened with Russian jamming and dazzling capability, they knocked some satellites offline in the Ukraine, they being Russian SIGINT capability, and the software programmers in downtown Los Angeles had the satellites back online in less than 15 minutes. So I'm not saying they couldn't disrupt operations, but it'd be pretty hard to degrade. It's a very survivable transport medium. If you look at Elira and some of the things we're doing with digital twins and the technology we have right now, you have to understand every aspect of the complexity of a network to really degrade network operations to an extent where you would cause combat operations to pause. That's just not very easy anymore. And so I know we're painting our adversary as a 10-foot giant, but the technology that's available to us, if we could just figure out how to adopt it within our formations, is really remarkable. So we talk about different levels of the network. At the tactical edge, I believe that 5G is going to be a critical component of our networks going forward. What do I mean by that? Well, we started using single-channel radio as a means to communicate, back somewhere around the start of World War II. It was like 80 years ago. So that technology is not as useful anymore. So as we sit here trying to figure out what waveforms we're going to buy from a lot of the companies that are here in these booths, I would ask you, would you, if I ask you to give me your iPhone or Samsung Galaxy and I was going to replace it with a single channel radio, would you, I would ask you, would you be okay with that? Of course not. It's laughable, right? So why are we still acting like that's a useful piece of technology? It's not. We need to get rid of it. We need to replace it with smart devices. Pick one. It doesn't matter. It just needs to be a smart device to load the software that I need to use to kill the enemy with. It's that simple. So 5G technology could revolutionize the command and control networks across the entire military. You take something like a Samsung Galaxy or an iPhone, could be a cross-domain solution for both NIPR and SIPRNet. That's your voice, video, and data capability all in one piece of hardware. So we don't need like one for SIPR, one for NIPR, one for JWICS. No, the technology exists. That's not required anymore. And if I had Marines on the battlefield, and rather than having like one single channel radio and a platoon of Marines, every Marine could have one of those devices on the front of their kit. And you want to talk about every sensor connected to every shooter. Every sensor is every single human being that wears a Marine Corps uniform. That's entirely possible in 2024. It's not like some dream in the future, right? So 5G is going to be the biggest enabler. You think about combat operations centers on the ground. If you're a communicator, you're preconditioned through your education to think that you have to, a COC is a 10. Like that's all. We can't break out of that paradigm. Like we just think even when we make PowerPoint slides, what is the COC a picture of on the slide? It's a tent usually, right? Completely unnecessary. And if you think about, well, why would that matter? I use Control Group 38 as a great example. I own this thing called a Gator radar. It's a software-defined radio, right? As soon as I turn that radar on, I become a target. Not me, but my Marines. It's no different than radiating with a radio. Pick a spectrum, SHF, UHF, K-band, it doesn't matter. If I radiate, I become visible in the electromagnetic spectrum. That's the same with radars, right? So I need to be able to move quickly. That's why 5G is critical. How fast do I need to move? How far do I need to move? Well, outside of the effective casualty radius of a cruise missile, that's how far I need to move. How fast do I need to move? Probably in like less than 10 minutes. So again, why do I need a tent? Because that thing takes a little while for me to set up and a little while for me to put down and load into a vehicle. If you make an argument that you may need it for light discipline, I would buy that. But I think that we need to think bigger. We need to break out of some paradigms, right? That 5G kit would enable you to be, your office would be wherever you were, wherever you're standing. You can do just about anything on an iPad or an iPhone that you could do on a laptop computer. Again, why do you need laptop computers? Why do you need thin clients? You don't need any of that stuff. You're preconditioned to think that you do if you've been in the service for a long time because that's all you've ever known. Again, got to break out of some old thinking. But that tactical cloud, you want to connect every sensor to every shooter. I would argue you could do that with the radio area network, with routing equipment. That's why we have comm units. And so that is where you're going to close the kill chain. You're going to close the kill chains on a network. So I think the faster we accept that, the further along we'll get, and the faster we'll do that. So what do I mean by that? You have to accept the fact that warfare is moving to semi-autonomous warfare. You have to be willing to accept that. So if you fly jets for a living, you have to be willing to admit that some of your wingmen are going to be robots. The longer you refuse to accept that, the farther we are going to fall behind as an institution. When I say institution, I mean the Department of Defense. So you're not wrong if you like to fly jets. You're not wrong if you like to fly helicopters. You're not wrong if you like to fly trucks. We just don't need humans doing that anymore. So, again, what's the strength of our country? I would argue it's the tech sector. Just pull a list of the Fortune 500 companies on the NASDAQ and just start at the top and start going down. Figure out how far you got to go down the list with your finger before you get to a company that's not a tech company. Our smartest engineers, our smartest talent, our best talent in the United States works in that industry. We're not leveraging it. We're stuck in with old ways of thinking. So I want to bring this up because you should be excited about what I'm saying. It means that there's so much potential for growth and for us to get better at what we do. And what we're talking about is closing kill chains. That's fundamentally what happens on the battlefield. It's not like a buzzword. It's like, you're out, if you're thinking from an offensive mindset, how many people with my background think about the network from an offensive standpoint? Again, you're trained not to think that way. You're trained the first thing out of your mouth after you say cyber is usually defense. We're just enamored with it. It's like cyber defense, got to protect the network. I would argue that, I said this yesterday upstairs, you should think about the network like a submarine captain thinks about the network. So I'm up, they see me, I'm down. So they don't even have NIPRNet on a submarine. So they go up at a time of their own choosing, throw a buoy out, I would suspect, I'm not a submarine expert, so that they could transmit, probably to a satellite, purge their email queue or whatever message traffic they need to pass to fleet headquarters or whoever they're working for at that moment in time, and then they pull that buoy in and they go down to fight another day. That's the same way you should fight a network if you're a communicator. You can't attack my cyberspace if you can't access my cyberspace. If my satellite's turned off 95% of the time, how do you suspect you're going to get on my network? You're not. That's my point. We've been fighting a different way for the last 20 years. We turn our satellite terminals on and we just leave them on. Well, when you're fighting against not a peer threat, and it's a terrorist organization with no SIGINT capability, that you don't have to worry about it. It's not a problem. Your network's not under attack. They don't have that capability. When you talk about peer adversaries or near peer adversaries like China and Russia, they have a significant SIGINT capability. So just don't let your network touch the World Wide Web 100% of the time. hard target. Turn your satellite dish on. Why do I bring that up? You talk about satellites in proliferated low Earth orbit and the amounts of bandwidth and the low level of latency that we can achieve with the technology that we're using. We're using them on ships, and Marines are using them ashore already. You don't need to have a persistent connection to the cloud. The cloud doesn't work that way. Hybrid cloud does not need to be persistently connected. That's what makes it hybrid. So the way you can fight that network today is much different than the way you could have fought the network 5 years ago. And we need to think like that. So you can't cyber attack something you can't access. And so I'm not sure that enough people are thinking about it like that because we're so enamored with defending the network and everything else. It's kind of ironic that zero trust architecture, which is the presidential mandate for the whole federal government from President Biden, zero trust architecture works in the cloud. The technology that drives the way that it works it's AI machine learning. It's cybersecurity with no humans. Turns out that the weakest link in cybersecurity is the human beings because we make mistakes. So think about that for a second. So anyway, we've got to be able to operate the network at the enterprise level, at the regional level, and at the tactical level. And if you start talking about application development, which is something that all the services are getting into now with software factories and teaching our Marines how to build software or design software and roll it out for use, you're going to need a network that can handle that. So if you think about data as the ammunition, the network is the weapon system. The network needs to be designed in a way that can support DevSecOps as an environment. And if you think about the creativity of our youngest soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, we're at the tip of the iceberg. If you think, you don't even have to say how many. Think about how many apps you have on your phone right now. You use them for banking and checking the weather, sports scores, like whatever is useful to you. It revolutionized your personal life many years ago. 2007, I think, is the year the iPhone rolled out. Think about the possibilities, the types of applications and the number of applications we could write in terms of software with our own people in the future. We're doing everything through software hosted on web interfaces, all sorts of things that we don't need to be doing anymore. So I'll stop there. I think that was a lot. The JADC2 Arena, Project Dynamis, is near and dear to me. It's a small part of what we're doing in Control Group 38, which is what I got asked to come talk about. So I want to open up the floor for questions and see what's on your mind. Thanks. Yes, ma'am.
Can you use the mic? Sure. I'm just short. My company actually works with JADC2 a lot. We discuss it, we think about it at McTissa, and so I was really interested in everything that you had to say. I guess my question, though, is maybe not a question, more of a comment, is I guess I don't understand the hesitancy to embrace the semi-autonomous aspect of warfare, because we've had the semi-autonomous aspect of warfare for forever, once we left hand-to-hand combat, right? I mean, we've always used machines. So I don't understand this hesitancy, and I actually don't understand the hesitancy in how to even incorporate it into the future. How do we stop the hesitancy? How do we as like the defense industry base help with that?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know if there's a perfect answer. It depends on the person. It depends on their experience, like what they do for a living. And I also think it probably has to do with your age, like how much experience you've had. If you've, I'll just use the Marine Corps as an example. If you've been in the Marine Corps for 20 years and you've reached some modicum of success doing things a certain way, like no matter what your MOS is, then you probably are going to be more inclined to like protect what's yours, like your territory, your specialty. I think everybody has a tendency to do that. It's probably just a human tendency. And I don't know that everybody's hesitant to transition to semi-autonomous warfare. I think autonomy scares people in general. I think that the short answer of why is ethics. I don't think the American people yet are ready for shoot, no shoot decisions to be made by machines. Congress is certainly not. So there's that aspect of it too. But the semi-autonomous warfare and like how to incorporate machines to do things that they're more efficient at. I think you're right. If you're saying that there's a kind of a general feeling that people aren't ready for that, I would agree with you. I think they are, and I don't know why the hesitancy. The notion of like thinking about being replaced is probably not an easy thing to accept. So I mean that's a tough one. It's like, wait a minute, you're replacing me with a robot. It's like, yeah, exactly what we said. So it's probably going to take a generation of to change. It's not going to happen overnight. I think when you look at somebody like me, I've been in the Marine Corps for 25 years. What got me here wasn't all that. It was what got me here. So there's that. And I think that you get to a point when you're older too, where you're like, you don't want to learn something new. I think meeting people my age that are saying the outlandish things that I just said is the exception, not the norm. You stick to what got you here, and you're thinking, I'll just kind of wait this out. I only got a few more years. There's probably some of that. There's probably some of that happening. I mean, this is not a popular thing to say, but does your age automatically qualify you as a leader? Does it qualify you as a thought leader? I mean, I have this conversation with my children. Mark Zuckerberg did not have to be 50 years old to start Facebook. That's not a thing. But in the military, it is. Hierarchy and chain of command, that's a real thing. So you can't just sidestep because you don't like it. We don't have any 19-year-old generals. But it's probably something to consider. I mean, I taught at the basic school for 3 years. I had 6 to 8 students in every one of my class out of 250 that were Ivy League graduates. If you want them to stick around, they don't need me to validate them, like how talented, how smart they are. They already know that they are. They're in the top 0.1% of Americans that applied to college, right? So if they think they have to stick around the Marine Corps for 25 years to reach any like level of what they would consider to be successful, probably not interested. So we probably ought to think a little bit differently about that too, because you want to retain your top talent. Sometimes your top talent is really young, and they may not have the life experience and the decision-making experience that some of our older people have, like people my age, but that doesn't mean they're not more talented. Think about the digital natives that are walking around in uniform right now that are, enlisted, we'll just say Marines, since I'm a Marine, like privates, PFCs, lance corporals, and sergeants that their understanding of technology far exceeds a lot of people that are my age. So that kind of answered your question, but not really. I tried my best, though. Sarah, what's up?
Sir, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm Matsu, one communications instructor. So there's a lot of integration going on at your unit between the MAOC, air defense, and air support, as well as yourself as a commo and an aviation unit with a strong ground background, integrating our air and ground into the MAGTAF, and then of course JADC2 with all the integration of systems. And you know as well as everybody else here that integrating all of those people, things, and systems is going to be key to success in the future of warfare. So what would be some of the lessons that you'd give to leadership in industry or leadership in the Marine Corps as to things that you've learned that brought you success in that integration?
Oh, yeah, good question. Yeah, I don't know if I got a great answer for that one either, but I think for in terms of command and control, like a future state, I would say as you try to task organize the Marine Corps into communities, I would say in a perfect world we wouldn't call it comm or aviation command and control. It's just command and control. And if every sensor talked to every shooter and we didn't need humans to do that anymore, like the network connectivity persisted, then the $1 million question, you know what you get paid the big bucks to do? Is that then what? And so my opinion, my answer to that question, then what would be, what we need to grow inside DoD is a cadre of data scientists. So we're running towards the sound of DevSecOps. We're training application developers. We're training our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marine to write software. That's good. It's cheaper when you do it yourself. turns out the reason your iPhone is so expensive is not the hardware, it's the software, that's exquisite software that's on your phone. And the people that write that are some of the smartest software engineers in the world, right? So if you think about it that way, that's what I think that the comm community, if we did in the aviation command and control community in the Marine Corps at least, in the future, would just be a cadre of data scientists. Because you think about it, like, what are you trying to do? Weaponize the data. Well, how do you do that? AI and machine learning, large language models, data analytics. You need people that understand that. So the Army has a cadre of people that are ORSAs. We train people in data science at Naval Postgraduate School already. So grow the cadre of people bigger and try to get the hardware to a point where it's interconnected, and we don't need to go out and install, operate, maintain a network from scratch anymore. It's persistent. And then you have edge devices, and you're just tying back to a larger architecture at the enterprise and the regional level. That's kind of my overarching vision. But the $1 million question is, well, what next? That's what I think. I think the comm community needs to become a data science community. So I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but that's my 2 cents. Yep. Tom, you look like you got a question. Tom's my friend.
Sir, I was smiling and I've heard this multiple times and agreed with everything. Huge fan of this Project Dynamis. But a lot of this end state it is resource unconstrained, especially when you start talking about the hard infrastructure when you're looking at the headquarters and installation level. So that's more of a comment than a question, but that was what I was thinking.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, at the end of the day, you're right. I mean, I think we got to start somewhere. I think we talked about this many times. So I mentioned it earlier. The Marine Corps has a network modernization plan. When I wrote this particular paper, it was kind of my I would say, if I had to describe what was my approach to my thinking, it was kind of first do no harm. Our community has a plan. Let's say the comm community, and the $1 million question is not whether the plan was good. It was it fast enough? That's why I call it an accelerator, because if you listen to what the intelligence prognosticators are saying, they're predicting conflict with our peer threat by 2027. That's not me saying that. That's the intelligence community saying that. So if that's the case, then we're on the clock. How fast we incorporate this technology into our warfighting formations is literally a graded event. We don't have time to do this across the FIDIP and wait 7 years. We've got to do it now. And so if that means we need to do it at a small scale initially to incubate this, and I used to tell General Goering this when I was still the MAL G6, don't believe me, make me show you. So give me things in small quantities, and then let me go to the field and test it, and I'll tell you if it works or not. And then you could make a decision that is related to scale, like how much you need to buy, where you need to put it. I'm not sure that we're there yet, but it's interesting. We're doing reverse requirements development right now, and so I was a requirements developer in the JROC in my previous job. And what I mean by that is we stopped. You don't have to stand up there. I like you too much to do that too. Thanks, Tom. We don't spend a lot of money on RDT&E anymore in the Department of Defense. We found I couldn't tell you as precisely what the year was like I can with the iPhone, but more than a decade ago, that's close enough for government work. More than a decade ago, we stopped spending large amounts of our DoD budget on RDT&E. Why did we do that? Because we couldn't keep pace with Silicon Valley. Our PPBE process doesn't work fast. I'm not arguing that it's broke. It doesn't work fast. So what does that mean? All of the people here that are here for all the right reasons, working for their particular companies in the defense industry, are trying to help us go faster, get the newer technology, infuse it into our formations as quickly as we're legally allowed to do that. The process is working against them. In order for you to bring me the technology, I have to tell you what I need. Well, what happens when Silicon Valley knows what you need better than you know what you need? Yeah, we have a problem now. So we don't understand some of the technology as well as the people designing it. And so we have a really hard time writing requirements now for software and hardware because we're not up to speed with what the latest and greatest technology is. And so it's created a dilemma. So the programming in the budgeting, planning, programming, budgeting, execution cycle goes back to Secretary McNamara when he left Ford Motor Company and came to the Pentagon to be the SecDef in the 1960s. That process does not work anymore. Silicon Valley's process works much better. So it's like, how do I take advantage of that? So when I say reverse requirements development, it's happening in this very room right now. So used to be, I wrote a requirements document in ICD. I told industry, I need a thing that does this. I need a thing that does this, right? I need a router that has these specs. Go make me one. A couple years back, a couple years later, this is years. Think 1980s. So as a frame of reference, they would go off, they would design it, they would build it, they would test it, then they'd bring it back to you, right? Eventually, you get to like technology readiness level 7, because the military just keeps giving you more money for testing and RDT&E. We still do that with Cat 1 acquisition programs. What's a Cat 1 acquisition program? Ford class carrier, Columbia class submarines, B-21 bombers, the ground-based strategic deterrent, which is the missile that's replacing Minuteman nuclear missiles. Those still go through lots of testing. Everything else, not as much. So what happens? We show up to AFCEA West and somebody goes, hey, I made this thing. What do you think? You like it? And you're like, great, what is it? And they show you and you're like, yeah, I could probably use that. And so I'm in the FMF. I don't make those decisions. I don't work at Headquarters Marine Corps. I did once. I got the T-shirt, but not anymore, right? So we're in this weird position where it's like you're trying to get me to endorse your thing that you make, whether it be hardware or software, and I'm happy to do it. I just I don't legally make those decisions, and so it's this weird place. And so you're bringing us things that are TRL 7 and TRL 9, like actual prototypes, and then we're having to reverse engineer the requirements documents to say, oh yeah, we like that. That's actually illegal. Like if you went to Defense Acquisition University, they're like, yeah, that's not how we develop requirements. That's illegal. But that's kind of the world we live in because we don't know what we want and we don't know what we need, which is why we need thought leaders, right? I mean, because there's a chance that I really do like what you make. I mean, I walk around and I'm like, wow, this is freaking awesome. Like there's all sorts of fantastic things, countless military applications for all of the things that we're looking at here at West. And I know that when I worked in the Pentagon, this is a point of frustration for our senior leaders across DoD every day. They know that the PPBE cycle is not efficient. They know it's not delivering fast enough. And we need to devise a new system that works better with software than it does with hardware. Because when the PPBE cycle started, everything was hardware. It just doesn't work as well with software acquisition, and most of our hardware needs to transition to software programs of record anyway. So we need to figure out how to acquire software faster and more in a more agile way. So that was a mouthful, but the way we procure equipment right now is very 1980s. It doesn't work very efficiently, therefore it's not very fast, and therefore not very effective either sometimes. So, but if you think about, am I just going to buy that at scale? No, probably not. It doesn't work that way either. So it's a challenging environment that we're operating in. We're trying to figure out how to leverage all the talent in this room really to bring it to bear, and that's a really hard thing to do in 2024 with the laws the way that they're written and the way that we have to go about conceiving new military ideas and then bringing them to bear in like a new program of record, for instance. So. What else? Anything else? We have 2 minutes. One more question? All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.